Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nathan Dean. Again, welcome to the Washington Policy Polls from Bloomberg Intelligence. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So let's talk about President Trump's one big beautiful bill and where are we at with it. So obviously, we're waiting for the Senate to release its snippets, its text, if you will, of the updated language on President Trump's one big beautiful bill. We're anticipating this week. It originally anticipated it tail end of last week or over the weekend. It sounds like things have just been slightly delayed. And this is the language from various committees regarding the Medicaid cuts, the SNAP cuts, the Inflation Reduction Act cuts, as well as the tax provisions. And we're also waiting for the Senate parliamentarian to make her views on the Byrd rule in terms of what some of these provisions will actually take place. Now, I think the one that everybody's paying attention to right now is the Senate Finance Committee. This is the one that deals with the tax portion of it. And so we'll see probably Thursday or Friday this week. That's what I'm guessing is we'll see when that language comes out. The Senate is actually going to have a short week next week because of the Juneteenth holiday. The House is actually gone. And so that's that unofficial deadline of when they want to have the text released by is this weekend so that they can have a couple of days to publicize it next week before they leave for Juneteenth. So where are we on the various provisions? Well, just going to run down the line. Medicaid, Senator John Thune had said in an interview last week that the Medicaid cuts most likely will get pushed back. If you remember, the House bill came out and said that some of these Medicaid cuts would actually take place after the midterm elections. Or I'm sorry, after President Trump's not President Trump's election, after the 2028 election. House conservatives came in, they moved it up to the end of 2026. Sounds like it's going to get pushed back. Same thing that can be said for the SNAP benefit portion of it, the supplemental nutrition assistance program, also known as food stamps. Those cuts will most likely be pushed back as well. When it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act, there's two really big things here: is the electric vehicle tax credit. That's out. It will most likely continue to be out. We've gotten some questions on what will happen if Elon Musk really is trying to push for this to actually come back into it. Again, I think the EV tax credit is out. And when it comes to the solar tax credits, the 45X and so forth like that, I think there is going to be a moderation and these cuts are going to be pushed back to its original House timeline just because, Senator Tom Tillis in North Carolina, he's even said that he's going to be pushing for this and that we've seen enough senators come across the line and say, look, this is important to us. So again, I think these are going to get pushed back. Now, when we get this overall question of what is the Senate package going to look like, it's hard to say, but I would say go back to the original House language. This was not the House language plus the House conservative language, but the original language that came out of the House Ways and Means Committee. That's probably where I think the Senate is going to directionally end up. But again, there are going to be differences and there are going to be specifics. So again, that's for the status of where we are. And then finally, for those of you in the New York, New Jersey area, we always get the question on SALT. What we're hearing right now is the Senate Republicans who do not care about SALT have said that sorry, let me try this again. The Senate Republicans that do not care about SALT was pretty much all of them because there are very few Senate Republicans that come from blue states like, New York or California and so forth. So the idea here is that they recognize they have to give the salty caucus in the House something, so it's not going to go down to zero. But I wouldn't be surprised if that $40,000 goes down to 30,000 or down just a little bit to the point where it puts those salt caucus into the standpoint of, yes, we can say that we fought for something and we were able to increase it, but at the same time, it most likely will come down a little bit. But time will tell. Representative Lawler is trying to actually request a meeting this week with some of the senators to explain his position. And at the end of the day, if it goes down too low, or if it gets scrapped entirely, I think the Representative Lawler and the rest of the Salty Caucus will just say, fine, I'm not going to vote for the bill. So that's where we are in terms of the one big beautiful bill. Next up is a rescissions package. So for all the talk about Doge, and I've talked about this on other calls before, the White House has to, in order to codify some of these Doge cuts, they have to send what is known as a rescissions package to Congress, and then the House and the Senate have to pass this rescissions package. Filibuster is not involved here. It's a majority vote in the House and majority vote in the Senate. So last week, the White House sent a rescissions package that had about $9 billion worth of cuts. Now, I looked at it. There's really no investment impact here. So let's just keep that in mind, really no investment impact. But in that $9 billion, the bulk of it is actually tied to the State Department, into USAID, and also for National Public Radio and PBS. Now, the House is going to have a vote on this probably as soon as I think the Rules Committee is meeting on it tomorrow, so maybe later this week. I probably gets through the House, but then it goes to the Senate, and Senator Collins, for example, has already said she's a no due to some of the language within the USAID. So, again, we'll have to see how it plays out. But just remember for rescissions packages, they have 45 days to actually pass this from when the White House sends it to the Congress. And if they don't, then Congress, the White House is actually then forced to spend that. The reason why I'm talking about rescissions packages now, even though I said that there's really no investable impact, is that there's a pattern emerging here where Congress allocates money and then the White House says we're not going to spend it. So this is not the last rescissions package we're going to see in 2025. So I'm just telling you about the process and I'm telling you about how it works so that when we get through additional rescission packages later this year, and they are coming, you get a better idea of what's in store. So other things going on, Fed Vice Chair for Supervision Michelle Bowman has been confirmed. She was confirmed last week. She's now the full Fed Vice Chair. She gave a speech on Friday. If you're in the bank sector, I highly recommend that speech. Reach out to me. I'll send you the link of it. But she talked a lot about streamlining bank applications. She talked about changing the examination process. She even flirted with the idea of changing something called as CAMELS ratings. I mean, we don't need to know what a CAMELS rating is, but you get the idea. But what I will say is that we do think this proposal on the leverage ratio is coming sooner rather than later. She talked about the leverage ratio in her speech, and the FDIC just over the weekend submitted a notice to OIRA, the Office of Interofficial something or other Regulatory Affairs. But if you go back to remember President Trump's executive order where he said to all the regulatory agencies, and he said, look, I want to know what you're doing, so you have to file a notice with OIRA, with the OMB, to tell us what you're doing. Well, the FDIC did that on the leverage ratio. And, the interesting thing here, and just don't read too much into it, but the title of what they submitted to the OIRA was the exact same title from the proposal from 2018, which changed the leverage ratio from 5% down to 3% plus 50% of a GSIB surcharge. So if they're just literally copying and pasting, and again, don't read too much into it, but if they are just copying and pasting, suggests that maybe it's the 2018 proposal, which I personally think it's going to be. So, and then, whether or not there's this additional carve out for treasuries, hard to say. I think right now, yes, but also if maybe they just copy and pasted, treasuries wasn't in that 2018 proposal. So again, stay tuned. I think this leverage ratio proposal comes out sooner rather than later. So June or July. August recess, because policymakers in Washington love getting things out before August recess, so I would anticipate it coming in June or July. On the crypto front, we have a markup in the House Financial Services Committee on the Clarity Act. This is that crypto bill that gives powers to the SEC and to the CFTC. There's a lot of Democrats that aren't happy with this bill. In fact, the Democrats on the House Financial Services Committee had a hearing, and I have to use air quotes here because as the ranking member, you're not allowed to call for a hearing. So as officially, it was a meeting, but they had a meeting on Friday morning at 9 a.m. to talk about how much they dislike this bill. But there are Democrats that are still in favor of this bill, and there are Democrats over at the House Ag Committee that are in favor of this bill. So this is why I think after this markup, we'll see what language changes. I don't think it's going to change all that much. There was some additional language about blockchains that got just inserted, that will be inserted into it. But I think this bill pretty much stays the way it is written, and then it goes to the House. I see House passage maybe later this year, September, October timeframe, depending on how the government funding situation plays out in September. And then I see it playing out even further into the Senate in the first half of next year. And one of the biggest questions we get on crypto is, okay, well, if there's all this Democratic opposition, how does it pass? Well, there's Democratic opposition, but not enough, in my opinion. And the absence of Clarity Act or the absence of this crypto framework, I think the courts are going to continue to allow the industry to operate in certain ways where there are regulatory gaps. And I think enough Democrats, in my opinion, are saying, let's actually just take this back, let's control it, and let's actually agree on it. So we'll see. And then the last thing I want to just call out is just as an FYI, I don't cover it, but our friends over at Bloomberg Economics does, and my friends and colleagues, Holly Frum and Elliot Stein cover it. But trade talks with the Chinese delegation are taking place today in London. So expect some catalysts to come out later tonight from those. The four key areas that they're working on is rare earth minerals, tax and export controls. So if you look about the AI diffusion rule, there's some potential there, tariffs and visas. So again, expect some catalysts later tonight, maybe on the trade talks. Obviously the China is the most important one. So again, I just wanted to call that out because just as an FYI. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for attending. Have you a great week. It's a little bit later this week. We're going to still do the call next week, even with Juneteenth, and then we'll go from there. So thank you again, and have a great week.